You are listening to the So Now What podcast with Lana Manikowski, episode number 146.
So now what? These three words raced through my mind time and time again during my journey through fertility treatments. I tried desperately to have a child, but never was able. I yearned for a community to join that could understand my struggles. I couldn't find one, so I created one with the So Now What podcast. I love that you found us.
Hello, beautiful. I'm so glad to have you here this week. If you're watching me on YouTube, you will notice that I am not in my normal setting for the podcast. If you don't watch me on YouTube, you can find me at lana.manikowski, where you can watch every week's podcast on video. All that to say, I am actually in Denver, Colorado right now. I am a member of the American Society of Reproductive Medicine and the annual Congress going on here. And this week's episode is not going to be edited. It's not going to be my normal quality and sound and all the stuff that I try to achieve every week with the podcast. But it's going to be very from the heart. And I think an episode that resonates with you. If you have been searching for closure, actually, I don't even know if closure is the right word. If you've been searching for recognition, I think that might be a better way of saying it, from your provider or from your fertility clinic about the path that you have been on. And that's what I'm going to talk about this week, because I finally, after 6 years of searching for this moment, I had that moment last night here when I got to meet face to face with my reproductive endocrinologist, who I haven't seen since 2018 or spoken to since 2018, when he delivered the news to me that my only frozen embryo was not viable for implantation. It went through genetic testing and my embryo had trisomy 16. And in that conversation, when we, kind of hashed out where I was in my cycles, he advised that we not move forward with any more IVF because my response rates were so low and my retrievals sometimes, my cases, sometimes cycles were canceled. My retrievals historically had a very low yield. So it was a very tough decision. And in that conversation, he offered me the opportunity to look into adoption services and to an egg donor that they could assist me in, and to think about it and let me know. And when that thought process ended up, after months of contemplating, are we going to adopt? Are we going to move forward with the adoption process? We knew that egg donor wasn't the right decision for us. And when there was no reason to call back and talk to the clinic about any more services, that's where my communication ended. And for years, I've envisioned what that conversation would look like. I'm going to get emotional on this week's episode because so much has elapsed since that last conversation. I went from being in a place of desperation, and I know that you probably feel that too if you listen to this podcast and you've been in that position where you feel like you were left to figure it out on your own. I'm at least glad that you're here and that you found me, but I understand the weight of what that feels like to not know where to go next, and to be used to having this support system through IVF and through your fertility treatments where you had constant check-ins and somebody who was telling you about next steps. And when you are the one responsible for your next step, it can feel very overwhelming. And yesterday I had the opportunity to seek out my reproductive endocrinologist. If you are not familiar with my story, I live in Chicago. I went through my first rounds of IVF locally in Chicago, and after a few year break of not knowing if I could pursue IVF again emotionally and mentally, I ended up going to a facility, a reproductive endocrinologist at a fertility clinic that was outside of Chicagoland. So I did remote monitoring, and then I would fly out to the clinic area where the clinic is, and I'd stay in a hotel for multiple nights, and hopefully get to a point where I could do a retrieval and a transfer. And that's a whole nother bumpy road that we could talk about another time. But all that to say, I didn't have regular, like, physical one-on-one meetings with my REI. I would pretty much do everything over the phone and talk to his clinic over the phone until I would come out. So running into him and seeing him at this meeting was something that I have been dreaming of, having this conversation and telling him where I ended up after my treatments. And I am recording this podcast episode to encourage you to think about what that conversation would be like, because there is a high probability that you might not ever run into your reproductive endocrinologist again. And I think a lot of this journey relies on us being able to verbalize what we needed for ourselves and what we have done to create that for ourselves. So when I saw my doctor, I'll just call him Dr. G, just out of privacy for me and for him. When I saw Dr. G last night, I told him, I said, I wanted to send you a Christmas card for the last 3 years since I became a certified life coach and since I started my podcast to tell you all that I have been doing. And I wanted to first tell you how much I appreciate the efforts that you made to help me create a child. And even though that didn't end up giving Jack and I the result that we wanted initially as parents, I just want you to know that I am creating change for the community and I'm trying to be a resource for women who are in that similar path, because adoption and egg donor services were not the right option for us. And when I didn't have a reason to call your clinic back, I didn't know what to do next. And so I told him how I quit my corporate career, very successful corporate career, to become a certified life coach and to help women navigate this path of being unexpectedly childless after IVF. And I think he was overwhelmed maybe by the conversation in the beginning. I don't even know if he realized who I was. I mean, it has been since 2018 since I've been a patient of record of his. So I think in the beginning he was probably like, who is this woman? And do I remember her? But I think through the conversation, whether he remembered me as a patient or not, it gave validity to who we are as women who leave our treatment journey without the children that we dreamed of, and imparts awareness on them that there is a void that needs to be filled, whether it's by the providers, whether it's through other healthcare measures, that we are seeking more assistance on this path. So at the end of the conversation, I asked him if I could, follow up with him and send him a link to my podcast and about the work that I do, and information about the Others Day brunch and the community that I'm creating for women who are seeking one and women who are trying to navigate this path alone. So I am on here today to share my story with you and to encourage you to decide what your story would be. If you were to run into your physician or someone from your fertility clinic that you felt was part of your treatment path, what would you want them to know about you? And it might start out with telling them what you wanted from them. And without getting what that thing was that you wanted or things were, I want you to give yourself recognition about what you have created with your life. And you may be at a point where you are still navigating all of this. You are at a crossroads of not knowing what to do next. And you might feel as though you are just hanging on, doing the best that you can do. And that is worth celebrating too. But I would love it if you could really take some time to do some paper thinking after this episode ends and write down what that conversation would be like for you and put it into words, because there is some therapeutic existence that is created when you recognize who you are and who you have been through this process. And I want to tell you that if you feel like you don't know where to go next, I can help you. I would love to be that person who helps you navigate that path of creating a life where you feel like you're finally thriving again and feeling fulfilled, even though your dream of motherhood did not happen for you. So I'll put in a link here. If you want to get on a Thrive call with me, that is something that I offer for free to anyone who wants to kind of figure out, where do you create that plan? That is something that I'm very passionate about helping women do. So you can book a free Thrive call with me where we'll go through and we'll talk about where you are in this process, where you want to go, and put together a baseline plan for you. But whatever it is, know that you don't have to get to a place where you are feeling amazing about living a life without children in order to celebrate who you are and create a story for yourself. You are always, always invited to understand, this is like something that I teach in the Thrive After Infertility Mastermind, that your story is yours to create. And oftentimes we are held in as hostages of a story that we've heard others talk about when life moves forward without children. And that story oftentimes is not the story that makes us feel proud of who we are and who we want to become. So as I leave you on this episode, know that what I'm doing here is in efforts to create a greater awareness for your story and my story and the many women who are out there trying to navigate life after your infertility journey didn't result in the children that you dreamed of. And I see you and I celebrate you and I love you. And I'm so damn proud of you for showing up every day in your life, even though it looks so differently than you thought it would. So I hope that you have a beautiful week. I love you. And remember that it's never too late to discover your meaning. I'll talk to you next week.
Hey, real quick, I just want to tell you about an awesome resource I created. If you have ever found yourself in conversations with people, or maybe people offering you suggestions about what you should do to become a mom, it's called The Top 27 Things People Say When You're Childless and How to Respond. You can get your copy free at lanamanikowski.com/things people say.